Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed today that Israel will win the war that began with a surprise invasion from Hamas in southern Israel and left hundreds dead, thousands injured, and at least 150 confirmed hostages captured. The Israeli military has deployed soldiers and tanks to the area, anticipating the next stage of its response, which many analysts believe will include a ground invasion of Gaza. And I think listening to what the prime minister said, I think that is true. Hours ago, a spokesman for Hamas military wing, their wing, threatened to execute a civilian hostage for every time an airstrike hits Palestinian holdings. What can we anticipate now that this war has begun? What might be behind this, and where is it leading? Joining me now to discuss all of this and more, Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, who serves as Executive Vice President of the Family Research Council. General Boykin spent the last 4 years of his 36-year military career serving as the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. He was also one of the original members of the U.S. Army's Delta Force, which was established to focus on counterterrorism and hostage rescue operations. General Boykin, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Well, it's good to be with you, Tony.
General, you've actually trained with the Israeli Defense Forces. You've spent time in Israel working with them. You know the land quite well. But I want to start with, I think, the most obvious. Was this an intelligence on the a failure on the intelligence front for the Israelis?
Unequivocally, it is. Tony, when I lived over there with the Golani Brigade, I also worked with their intelligence services. And I will tell you, they had no equals, I think, in the intelligence business because it was a matter of national survival for them. So they had to be in their A game every day. And I think what has happened is the internal turmoil that is taking place in Israel, the squabbling in the Knesset and the many political parties that they have there, I think they took their eye off the ball. And as a result of that, they just simply missed it. Because I can tell you the people that I served with over there, that I was became close to over there, if they were still in positions that they were in at the time that I was there, I don't think this would have happened.
Yeah, during the time that I worked with the State Department's anti-terrorism effort, I worked with a number of Israelis, and they were, as you said, they were top of the line because they had to be, because this was real for them. I think you're absolutely right. When you look at, there's been all the controversy over the judicial reforms. It split the country. You've had so many elections. It's just been, for the last really 4 years, we've just seen turmoil in Israel. So I want to step back for just a moment. Should that not speak to the United States? May we find ourselves in a very similar position given what's going on here?
Yeah, that's a great point, Tony. And I think that the answer to that is again, an unequivocal yes. That same kind of thing could happen to America. We've had our 9/11, but if we don't make some very clear decisions in terms of what we are going to do in our military, as well as our intelligence services, and that includes the FBI, we're going to see the same thing. You know, they're still out there. They still want to destroy us. And I think that we have got to get more serious about this because we've got enemies that have told us that they want to destroy us.
Well, when you look at our southern border, how porous that border is, where we've had over 7 million have crossed the border since President Biden took office. And then all across the country today, we've seen these pro-Palestinian demonstrations in major cities. I mean, I would think we have our own potential problems right here at home.
Yes, and that's a very good point to bring up, Tony. People say, and you hear every commentator say when asked what is their ultimate objective, and they say it's to destroy Israel. It is to destroy Israel. They can't do that. and they're not stupid enough to think that they can do that. But what they can do is unite these groups all around the world, not just in the Middle East, but these groups all around the world will be reunited with them, and that could bring on a new set of problems and certainly a much larger and more determined enemies. And again, we've got to wake up and understand that we could be next.
General Boykin, having trained and served with the Israeli military, the mindset there is much different. And I think you heard the speech, very brief comments from the Prime Minister earlier this evening, very resolute. What is your sense in terms of what the Israeli military will do to neutralize the threat from Hamas?
Okay, we start with the intel, because this is going to require a great deal of intelligence, and they're going to have to work overtime to make sure that they gather the intelligence that will assure them that they know where the targets are that they should be hitting. I think there will be a ground war. I don't think that the Prime Minister has said nothing to give us an inkling that he is willing to do anything other than going in there and cleaning this place out, and that's what he needs to do, and that's going to require ground force. And they've been in there several times before. I don't know if it's 5 or 6 times they've been into Gaza and had all-out warfare there in Gaza. But this time, I don't think they're going to stop until they have essentially destroyed Hamas. They have to. They don't have any choice. They look at the number of people that they have killed in this operation that the Hamas has killed there is incredible. It's just incredible. And this is I mean, we all know Israel. We all know that Israel, it takes its security seriously, but one lapse in your focus on what you're up against and how they could come after you, it can be very damaging, and I think that's what has happened here.
I want to go to motivation here for just a moment, General. I know we're looking at this, it's just unfolding, and it's still, as we were talking with Chris Mitchell earlier, it is still very volatile, and we don't know the outcome here. But the sense of timing here by Hamas, of course, the connection with Iran been a longtime funder of Hamas and their terrorist activity, as well as Hezbollah. But what do you think there's been a lot of discussions. This hasn't made a lot in the news. It's been talked about a little bit about the Saudi-Israeli peace discussions that have been underway to bring about a greater level of peace, which I don't know if everybody knows it, but Iran and Saudi Arabia are bitter enemies. Could that have factored into this to try to disrupt the normalization of those relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel?
Yeah, certainly it could. But keep in mind, even though they are traditional enemies, it's the Sunni Shia split, it's the Persian Arab split. Back about 6 months ago, President Xi, after having visited Russia and talked about a new world order, he then invited some of the other leaders in that part of the world there. And then finally, he went over to Saudi Arabia, and they sat down with Iran, and they brokered what is allegedly a peace agreement between those two. So I don't think that we should make the mistake of having any great expectations of the Saudis becoming friends with Israel or with America. I think they'll play the game to the extent that they have to, but I don't see that as being as actually coming to fruition in terms of an allied type situation or outcome. But what I think is important is for the Israelis to recognize that you cannot trust the Saudis. You just can't trust them. And keep in mind that on 9/11, the majority of those people were from Saudi Arabia.
So, General Boykin, let's talk about the Biden administration just weeks ago in the hostage prisoner exchange, where they also released $6 billion in frozen oil assets to Iran. Is that a factor?
Well, I think unequivocally that is a factor, yes. And we're the administration is telling us none of that money has been released, and absolutely, if you say so, I believe you. I believe it hasn't been released. But I am not stupid, and nor are most Americans stupid enough to not recognize that that money is still a factor, because they could have encouraged the Saudis to give them the money up front, and then they could get it back at a later time. So I think that this is just foolishness for us not to think that they can't get this money now just because it hasn't been released. And I think that's exactly what is going to happen. They're ultimately going to give them the money. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Saudis or some of the others gave them the money up front to be able to launch this operation.
You talk about our military and what needs to happen there. I want to play a clip from John Kirby. This was just a couple of hours ago on Fox. Asked about, well, I'm just going to play the clip, and I'm going to get you to respond to it. Play the John Kirby clip, please.
He said it was more frightening than a nuclear war. Is that it's more frightening than a nuclear war in this moment?
The president believes wholeheartedly that climate change is an existential threat to all of human life on the planet. That's just science. That's a fact, Martha.
So with everything that's unfolding globally right now, it is climate change that our military, this administration, wants to focus on.
Yeah. Again, I don't think Americans are stupid, and you really have to dig deep to be able to make a claim like that. That is not true. It is simply not true. One EMP fired over the United States will destroy about 80% of the United States. An electromagnetic pulse. It's crazy for us to keep saying this, but it's even crazier for those who believe it, that this is worse than a nuclear weapon. Really? You really believe that?
Is this to is this to try to distract Americans from the real problems?
I think it is. I think it's very much.
So, General, last question for you. We've been watching over a year now in Ukraine. How long do you think we're going to see military action in Israel? How long is this going to take to play out?
Listen, I think that this is going to be months and months. It could go a year. I mean, it depends on just how determined the Israelis are to destroy Hamas. It's going to go on for a long time. But a lot of that is not going to be fighting per se in the Gaza Strip. A lot of that is going to be doing the intelligence work that has to be done to be able to identify every target they ought to be killing or destroying. And sometimes it's humans and sometimes it's facilities. But the other thing is when they do start, it's going to go on for quite a while. And this is complicated by the hostages. It's complicated by the hostages. And I can assure you, right now, we either have on the ground, on board a ship, or pre-positioned somewhere in the area, we've got our counterterror forces, because there are Americans that have been captured. And the United States, I'm sure, is going to insist that our forces be there for any rescue operations that are launched out of there. And these forces can launch in 4 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, with their full equipment, and they have planes on standby that allow them to launch in 4 hours to wherever they're going in whatever part of the world it is. So,
General,
I think
we're up against. We're at the end of the program. We're going to continue this conversation throughout the week. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, great to have you on the program.